Welcome, welcome everyone. It's so lovely to have you all here, whether you're one of our delightful panelists who are looking up each other's noses, or whether you are joining us for this conversation, or women on the inside that are joining us as we send this to you. Thank you for holding the space and for being here today. My name is Nikki Weaver. I'm the founder of On the Inside, and really this conversation came about from a conversation that I had with Caroline and driving in my car, thinking about the ways in which trauma connects and how trauma lives on a stage through much of Tina's work, and how trauma lives in the body through much of Bessel's work. And I was really curious about what would happen if we allowed the three of us to meet in this intersectional conversation. So thank you for being a part of this experiment and for journeying with us. My mother worked in maximum security in the state of California. As a kid, I watched her teach literature and drama to incarcerated men. And at the time, I was 8 or 9 years old. And what I remember most about her storytelling was witnessing grown men have open conversations. And I watched them drop from their heads down into their bodies. And I think it was the first time that I'd ever seen a grown man cry, was sitting inside a prison cell. And that memory still sits in my heart, sits in my body, and wondering sort of as I've grown into an adult myself, what it was she was doing and what were the tools that she was using that allowed men to access their emotional centers. And it was really through storytelling. So here we are. I wanted to introduce our panelists here, and then we'll sort of get moving, and you'll have an opportunity, those of you that are listening, to hear from these wonderful, wonderful people here today. Bessel here is the author of Body Keeps the Score. He's also a psychiatrist, a researcher, and an educator based in Boston, and president of the Trauma Research Foundation in Massachusetts. We had an opportunity to train with Tina Packer here in 2014. I think it was, Bessel, although forgive my my brain and my my body. Time is a bit warped. Tina is here, who a friend, a mentor, founder of Shakespeare and Company. She's directed and acted in almost all of Shakespeare's productions and taught the entire canon all over, I should say. Continues to teach me. And she's the writer and actor of Women of Will. Caroline here, who is sitting next to me, was formerly incarcerated at Coffee Creek, which is where we worked and played together in a production of Twelfth Night with Open Hearts, Open Minds, with Carla Grant's organization, who I believe is here today. And it's a nonprofit that was started in Oregon. Now Caroline works for On the Inside as our project manager for our year-long book project, creating a book with women on the inside, side by side, women on the outside, of stories, artwork, and poetry. And also assists and facilitates our regular class series. It works with women on the inside and outside, and a weekly newsletter. Caroline's a committed mother, a partner, and a survivor. She's working to overcome judgment of herself and her community. Please welcome Caroline to this conversation.
Hello, my name is Caroline. Like Nikki said, I am a formerly incarcerated. I'm just going to take you kind of back to where it all started. I was born into a family of 4 total, and my mom and dad were super codependent, and my dad was very physically and mentally abusive. So that's where my core beliefs started. And when I was about 6 or 7 was the first time I was molested. My parents were watching some children, and an older brother molested me. At the time, I didn't understand what was going on. I was playing house, and I was a wife, and I really enjoyed what I was doing. So I didn't really tell my truth until I was an adult. For some reason, I protected this abuser. When I was 15 was the very first time I was raped, and I went about a month without telling anybody. And the first time I ever drank alcohol, I told my story to a friend of mine, and she went and talked to my mom about it. From there, at this point, my parents were divorced because of the physical abuse. Back then, if you reported to DHS that you were being abused, they sent home a letter stating you aren't allowed to abuse your child. So my parents split up. I was living with my mother, and while she was at work, a friend of hers that at the time, I was a young teenager, I thought he was cute. Um, so after when I reported it, well, through the, let me go back a little bit. Through the rape, um, people have a fight or flight response or freeze. For some reason, my whole life of trauma, I've been stuck on freeze. So I kind of just laid back, looked at the clock, and knew my mom was getting off of work in 15 minutes and it would be over. That day she went grocery shopping. And when he was done with me, I went downstairs. He hung out outside smoking a cigarette. My mom got home and they went to the store together. And he hung out at my house afterwards. And I locked myself in my room and wouldn't come out. And my mom was offended that I wasn't polite to her friend. Oh my gosh, I'm losing track of what I'm saying. Okay. And as the night went on, I went with her to the store and I could smell his cologne on the seatbelt and I threw up. She didn't know at that point, obviously. Fast forward to after I reported the rape, it's been about a month, no physical evidence. So I told my story to police officers, district attorneys, and tried to attempt to trap him in a phone call about it. Didn't work. And through the trial, come D-Day, I like to call it, this day forever changed my life. The DA that had my case, his name is Eric Hasselman, and he will forever shape my life. His wife gave me clothes so I could look professional because I came from a dysfunctional family who had no boundaries and how to look professional. And he walked me through it really. And he also gave me a lot of great advice and said, you can overcome anything in your life. I have. And if a DA is telling me that, I could. So we're waiting for sentencing, or not sentencing, we're waiting for the jury. It takes about an hour and we're all sitting in the room, and the 11 out of 12 jury members said not guilty. I was, on the phone call, I was cussing and I sounded like a delinquent teen. And I mean, I try to understand where they were coming from, but what I won't forget is that one jury member who had the courage to not be influenced by every single person around him and stood true and held his hand up saying guilty. He did that. I don't know who he is. One day I hope to let him know that that one person I held that and it carried me. Fast forward a little bit, I got into a relationship that I was head over heels with, and he started using heroin, and he also had a different ideal of a lifestyle, and I had to love myself more than him, and I had to break up with him, and I moved on to my current relationship I'm in now. And this person that I love so much, he died 30 days after I got in my new relationship, so it was off to a great start. And that took a lot for me to process. I got into a car accident shortly after that, and I got prescribed pain pills. And for the first time in my entire life, I knew what it was like to not feel suffocated by pain. And I ran with it. I started using pills, and I got pregnant, and I used through my pregnancy. Think whatever is out there for my mother, I was able to be as dysfunctional as she is and we are, she's always been my person to lean on. So I was able to be honest with her through my pill addiction and tell her I needed her to take my daughter, because it wasn't fair what I was doing. When I switched from opiates to heroin, I took my daughter to my mom for the last time. And I said, I'm lost right now and I can't take care of my daughter. And I left. And DHS got involved. And I started doing crimes to fuel my addiction. I couldn't afford it anymore. I started breaking into people's homes, stealing from stores. My relationship was, we were both my partner and I were addicted to heroin and meth, and we spiraled, lots of trauma in that relationship. And then I broke into my brother's house on Thanksgiving. And it's probably the best thing that ever happened, honestly, because he had the courage to tell the police, and I was sent to prison. And I remember pleading with that DA, please, please, my daughter, I don't want to go. I just need help. And he says, I'm giving you long enough to get you help. I was sentenced to 30 months. I did a little less than 2 years. And I have really, really dug in. I did like a rehab while I was incarcerated, and parenting classes. And then it just kind of, it felt like something was missing. I I kited to life skills and got into the theater class there. And that is where I met Carla and Nikki. And after one session, they gave me the lead role, Viola, in The 12th Night. I thought they were crazy. They didn't even know who I was. But through that experience, I remember, Nikki, I was like, what does reciprocity mean? What does that mean? And all Nikki could say to me is, what does it mean to you? That's what you play, what it means to you in your heart. And I didn't understand what was happening, but through the journey of, I've never done theater before or performed or anything like that, I got to find something in myself. And, I was standing in front of inmates, performing and looking at their judgments. But then when it came to the last performance, which was to the public, I'm looking at all these people who fund the nonprofit and wondering, what do they think about me? What do they wonder, like, why I'm here? Are they judging me? Are they seeing if this program actually works? And I was so scared. And, I watched my best friend get on the stage with these yellow tights. And I said, oh man, if she can dance in yellow tights, I could do this. And I did it anyway. And that is what I use to fuel me, no matter the feeling that comes up, because it's all just brain science. It's all just chemicals reacting. So I just, I use these skills because when you're performing, you have to like cope in your body through this experience. And I do it anyway. And I got out of prison, and I am achieving a life, and I'm happy anyway, regardless. And I learned that through doing theater. And it was such a beautiful and deep experience. And with that, Tina.
There's a line, Tina, that Caroline and I were talking about last night from Viola that I'm sure you know in your sleep. I am not what I am.
Yes. I mean, what strikes me about your story, Caroline, and especially that it came through doing Shakespeare, or at least part of the recovery came through doing Shakespeare, is in all the Shakespeare plays, the protagonists, the lead characters, have to plan their life, if I can put it like that, realizing that you're not just going to be at the effect of what comes at you all the time, but having an ability to plan your life. So as you know, Viola gets washed up on a seashore and she's lost her brother and she's lost everything. And you'd think she'd go into despair because she doesn't know what to do. But she starts thinking, well, I'll disguise myself as a man. And what I can do, I know, is sing really well. And I'm going to find somebody I can sing for and he'll give me money. She starts planning her life. Do you understand? And so if you have a plan for your life, all the vicissitudes, all the things that go wrong start getting absorbed in the plan for your life. And I think that's one of the big things about doing Shakespeare plays, is that the characters themselves have to step out. They have to, and so because you're playing them, you're stepping out and you're training your brain and your body to step out. You know, I'm not gonna let other people define me. I'm gonna say, you know, these things, and I'm going to tell the truth as far as I can within my circumstances. So, you know, I have lots more reasons why I think Shakespeare is a good idea. But just in listening to your story, Caroline, I thought, my God, she chose to go to the theatre class. She chose to play Viola. Well, they cast her, but then you chose to accept it. And then you start taking on Viola, then he's called Cesario. She becomes, he said there's the whole transgender thing in there. You start choosing to speak out in this way. And of course, he gives you incredible words. You know, Bessel can probably speak far better than I can as to why you got yourself trapped in that cycle of you know, addiction and I'm going to call it cruelty, but cruelty to yourself and cruelty to other people. What, except that you did have enough of a plan to give your daughter to your mother, you know, but the rest of the time it feels as if you're reacting all the time to life instead of stepping out and saying, this is what I want out of my life. Enough? Have I said enough?
You can say more, Tina, or you can cut it off and hand it to Bessel, whatever
Yeah,
makes sense.
I'll hand it to Bessel for a bit. I'll hand it to Bessel. Then I've got a lot more things I want to say, of course, but I'd like Bessel to talk for a bit first.
You know, as Tina is talking, I'm really sort of still intrigued that Shakespeare, that most kids who go to high school don't really love doing Shakespeare. Huh? It's too complicated, it's weird language. And then I don't know why Shakespeare is so uniquely purifying for people. It is still weird to me. This guy who lived 400 years ago gives us the words. But to go with Caroline's story, you know, when all this stuff happens to you, you don't become a very clearly organized person. You just live with stuff. All this stuff keeps happening to you, and you just become a creature that tries to survive. And you live with sensations in your body that you can't identify. You live with a lot of feelings, a lot of emotions, but by and large, the whole rational part of your brain doesn't get a chance, because the rational part of your brain depends on being able to talk to each other, having a dialogue. So you only become a clearly defined person if you can say, this is what I know, this is what I see, this is what I feel. And if everybody around you is doing weird stuff and living in a different reality, what you're left with is a lot of sensations that are unbearable and a lot of emotions that are too much. And you try to do things to make those sensations go away. Huh? And I think what you went through is sadly a story. I have thousands of people, tens of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people go through what you went through. And it's so common. And it all has to do with being raised in an environment where stuff is done to you that you have no control over, and nobody sees your reality, so that reality lives inside of you, and you just are filled with tension and fear, but you don't know who you are. And what for me is so fascinating is how the theater does liberate people. And again, your story in that regard is also not a new story. And that when you get up there, be nice to actually see the videotapes of you playing this role for the first time. And when I went to this wonderful program at Shakes and Co. called Shakespeare in the Courts, and I thought I'd see these amazing juvenile delinquents who've become great Shakespearean actors. I have never seen such terrible actors in my life. You know? Because these kids have never said a word of truth. They've never been able to say a whole sentence. They have never said something and somebody else goes, wow, that's interesting what you're saying. So this whole purpose of language, namely to establish a dialogue with somebody else, has been absent from their life. And now Shakespeare gives them language that doesn't come naturally to themselves. And they need to speak these damn sentences. And for the first time in your life, you say something and people go like, wow, you are somebody. And people react to you. And you're part of a troupe. And other people say, you have to show up for your role because you're necessary, because we cannot play our role if you don't play your role. And so for maybe the first time in your life or one of the first times in your life, you feel like, I'm an important part of this production that we're doing. And I better get myself up there and stand up in my full house and try to say these lines. And luckily it's not me because I'm just a little piece of shit, but I'm playing somebody else and I can feel it in my body what it would have felt like to be a king or an important person. And you're allowed to separate yourself out, but you give your body a gift of feeling what it feels like to be somebody who has a purpose in life and somebody who's able to say things. And before too long, you become that person because you are allowed to live in a body that you've never had before. Because your body before was just trying to survive whatever you were trying to survive. But now you have a new physical identity almost of, I'm Viola. And the next time you're somebody else. And next time you're somebody else. Oh, and then you say, oh, this is what it feels like to be a person. And this is what it feels like when people look at me. And this is what it feels like when people respond to me. And so the theater can be a profoundly healing thing for people to embody a role that's different from the role they've had before. And to say, oh, this is what it feels like to stand up. And because I'm not me, because I'm a terrible person, but because I'm somebody else, I can stand up in full height and say, oh, that's what it feels like to be an important person. And before too long, that becomes part of you. I think theater is one of the best treatments of trauma there is.
I highly agree. Tina, you should jump in and
No, I was just going to say exactly that, Nikki, and I think probably because both you and I know what theatre can affect. You're both pretending to be somebody else, but you're not. There's only you up there, so you're actually training your body and your mind to think in different ways and to feel what before would be a knee-jerk response and you'd go off down that. Your character doesn't do that. So your character opens up this other way for you to go. Right. And I think
very hard work.
Yeah. And because the language is so strong, because I know it's weird, Shakespeare's language, but within that, once you get used to it, there are rhythms in it. There are several meanings in words. There's a life in it and an energy. It has its own life and energy. Whereas, mostly we speak just and we don't breathe deeply into the body, and we don't take on what it really means to speak. And in Shakespeare, you have to take on what it really means to speak, because you're not only speaking to other people on stage, but you're speaking so that everybody in the audience can hear you. And so suddenly you come to rely on this language, which has a spiritual quality as well as a feeling and emotional quality, and it will support you. And so there's something about language in the body, as opposed from here to here. You know, I always say this about the Queen of England, that she speaks from here to here, so that she doesn't have to feel anything at all. She's a wonderful woman, but she's been bred not to run away from the savages, you know. And
an acting teacher, Tina, in my college in Australia used to call it, that's where you act from your nipples up. You don't feel anything below your nipples. It's all here.
Whereas we know that acting really is acting from the nipples and below, you know, so your heart and your gut and all those things. Otherwise, you don't embody what you're doing, and people aren't interested in looking at you. And intuitively, you want people to look at you because you're up there. You've done the ritual of saying, I will get up there. And it is a ritual. And it's, and I think the other thing why Shakespeare is particularly good is that he, in the plays themselves, even if you only do part of the plays, this idea, there's always these kind of different levels of truth. So you can trust him psychologically. In other words, he's going to give you a psychological picture of human beings, which is accurate. You know, so you can trust him politically. So he'll give you what the political situation is. And for instance, for most of the women in the plays, unless they disguise themselves as men, in which case they change the political situation, but they have to deal with the patriarchal system all the time, that you're meant to obey your father, you're meant to obey your husband, you're meant to, you know, they even used to have arguments at this time about whether women had souls of their own, or whether they actually, it belonged to their father and to their husband, you know. So if you were a girl, it was actually your father's soul you belonged to. And then when you got married, somehow it magically transferred over. I mean, it's really silly stuff.
That's one way of putting it.
but what you're doing when you start acting Shakespeare is that you're taking on the political situation of this character and the psychological situation of this character. And then you're also, you know, there's always this kind of philosophy underneath it all, asking the question, what does life mean? You know, why are we all put on this planet? So your consciousness is going to start expanding. And you know, I don't know what you'd say, Caroline, about why you were put on this planet, but why would you say you were put on this planet?
What I would say,
and then we're going to ask all of you this question too.
Why was I put on this planet? I think that I have been strong enough to endure to be able to learn and emulate what I learned to other people. Right. I don't know any other reason.
But even knowing that you've got a purpose, you know, and that you affect people and you're not just at the effect of events, as Bessel said, you get buffeted, but knowing, okay, this is coming at me now. How am I going to use this to step forward, as opposed to allowing myself to go down because I'm so depressed and so it seems so hopeless. And,
right.
And the very beginning of stepping out seems enormously important. Bessel.
Well, you know, we sort of glossed over what Caroline said at the beginning, but she actually did an amazing thing to start off with. She told us about all the horror she experienced as a growing up.
Yeah.
A very hard thing to say. You know, none of them are saying like, hey, I went to school, I got the best grades, papa, I was part of the team. They're all embarrassing things in a way. And to be able to say that about yourself is an enormous act of courage, which few people have. To just say, this is what happened to me. This is my story. That took, I bet it took you a good amount of time to be able to say that without freezing or collapsing or wondering what people say of you. So I want to say that is such an act of courage that you had, to say that about yourself. And I would imagine that Shakespeare helped at that, because one of the big things about trauma is you always blame yourself. You always think, this is happening to me because I'm a disgusting person, I'm terrible, or whatever. You always think that means I'm defective. And so you go into life as a person who's always ashamed about themselves. And I was just so impressed with your capacity to say, this is what happened to me, and not to say it's all because I'm a terrible person. It's like, shit, man, I really was born in very, very bad circumstances, and I'm working myself out of it, which is an enormously challenging and powerful thing to do, which many people have a very hard time doing it. I'm always part of what makes my work so interesting to me is that I deal with people all the time where you go like, oh my God, how the hell did you survive this? And your story also. And then people find a way out. And they go like, wow, that's a hell of a lot better than this privileged kid who went to Harvard Medical School. I mean, that doesn't take a lot of work. When the cards are stacked in your favor. But when the cards are against you, so this issue of shame, I think is very important. Huh? And in the theater, you get up there and Tina is particularly good at that. So you help you to embody, to say the words, and to have the capacity to say, this is who I am. This is what happened to me. Very hard thing to do. And it's of course easier to do when you play some other character like Viola, who isn't you, but eventually the stuff comes into your own body and becomes part of you. Like, amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know, it's always embarrassing to stand up in front of other people. What will people think?
But Bessel, if I can just add to what you say, the thing is not to deny the shame or how painful it is. It's to be able to use it so instead of the shame shutting you down and you keep the secret and you think the secret is going to protect you from the shame, it's not. It's not. It's just going to fester it more. Yeah. So what theatre does is that you actually take the shame, because you can feel it in the body, and then you put it out there, you expose it. And that very act of exposing it starts reducing its power. And suddenly it's a useful tool to you instead of a humiliating, destructive tool to you. Do you understand, Caroline? And I don't know whether, I mean, Nikki obviously understands this intuitively, which is why she does theatre in the prisons. But I don't know whether you actually could feel the shame beginning to let go. And it starts becoming, hell no, that's what happened to me. I'm not going to be ashamed of it. I'm actually going to tell people about it. I'm going to put it out there in the world.
I just want to say something. I want to go back to something Bessel said. I want to kind of like, okay, so how I see this is when I never felt like, why is this? Well, I guess sometimes I do feel like, why is this done to me? But at a very young age, I spend a lot of time trying to find like the science of why I think the way I do or react the way I do, because that's how I manage my unmanageable emotions, like the anxiety I'm feeling right now. What I learned from my dad, his mom abandoned him. He didn't grow up. You know, his circumstances were created my dad. So as a young girl, and probably because of my mom too, because my mom always wanted to prove that I love you unconditionally. I will always be here for you. And so as a little girl, I was a daddy's girl, but he also mentally and physically abused me. But I felt like he needed that person that he could take that out on and that would love him anyway. And so I embodied that. I loved him anyway, even through the abuse, because I could take it. I was strong enough and he was not, and he needed help. And this is emulated through my whole life, all my relationships. I've not healed by any means. Trauma healing for me is never ending. I still haven't processed a rape that I went through in my addiction. Or the domestic violence that was going on in my relationship. We're currently working through that now because we're still together, and I have to be able to let go of the things that happened in our addiction for me to, not hold it against him and to learn him for who he is now. I'm still learning how to do that. So I think that it is shame. I don't know. What is your take on that after hearing that, Bessel?
I think I have nothing but admiration for your courage. It takes courage to do it, you know? It really takes a lot of guts to be able to confront all this stuff and to confront yourself. And I think that's, again, part of what the theater does to you. You guys are sitting there together. In theater, you find people who are supporting you to find your voice. And so it helps you to get the courage to actually confront all these very painful things. Much hard, very, very difficult to do all by yourself. But in theater, you get people who believe in you and believe that it's worth your while to actually do it. And unlike in families where people say the most terrible things to each other, say you're a worthless piece of shit anyway, in the theater say, no, I'll help you to play this role and to really do it well. And so you get a lot of deep support to get the courage to go on this journey, which is a very arduous journey. That's my reaction to what you say. And then I think you're also claiming a certain amount of innate talent that you had. Right? You always analyze what's going on. You always try to figure out people's motivation. And that's great, you know. And that's also what you need, is that curiosity of what the hell is going on here.
You know, I feel like I get stuck. There's something in your book about hypersensitivity.
Yeah.
I'm there. That's
Yeah.
where I'm stuck at. I'm overanalyzing. I overanalyze everything.
Yeah.
I don't trust humans.
Yeah.
I'm trying to learn to trust humans. You know.
Well, be careful.
Yeah.
As you know,
Right.
people are a mixed bag, you know.
Right.
People who prefer their cat or their dog over humans, I go, I get it. Your dog will not hurt you.
Hopefully.
I think there's something I want to touch on when I think about theater and therapy and the difference, and that theater happens in a public setting, right? We prepare, we rehearse, we work in collaboration. We decide that we're going to tell the truth, our own truth or Shakespeare's truth, if we're talking about Shakespeare. And then in a public setting, we strip our hearts, strip our souls, and let whoever happens to be in the audience witness all of that undoing, unraveling, becoming, all of that. I'm curious about how that changes us, Tina and Bessel. How do we heal when we're making theater? And how do we heal when we're in therapy?
Well,
Good question.
I can only, I'll just talk from my own experience. As why I wanted to do theatre was that I knew I could travel further and access more parts of myself if I was doing theatre, and that it allowed me to say something which, when I just tried to live only in life, I couldn't. My first marriage was horrible, a horrible marriage. And why it was so horrible was that he was emotional about absolutely everything. So anything that happened, the smallest thing, he'd go into rages about it, or he'd kind of, and I felt trapped. I was 7 years in that marriage, and I had my son, Martin Jason, during that marriage. And there was a day when I realized I would die if I didn't get out of that marriage. It was an absolute knowledge that I would die if I didn't leave. And it was that knowledge of knowing that I would die that gave me the courage to, I hated hurting him. That sounds so stupid, doesn't it? When he was wrecking the whole of my life, but I hated hurting him. He were, I felt it was morally indefensible what I was doing, blah, 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 all these voices in my head. But when I realized I would die, I actually left him. And the act of leaving gave me, I knew I then had to do what I wanted to do. In other words, I couldn't not do what I wanted to do because I'd done this awful thing, you know. Just as a little aside, this thing of making art out of your pain, that my son has just made a little 10-minute film about one of the worst incidents of his young life with his father. And he's gone back to school now after drugs and this and that and the other, Caroline, but he's gone back to school and he made this 10-minute film. And he's made a film about that one of the worst incidents. And it's just got into, and he's still a student, it's just gone into the LA Shorts Festival. He's one of the 12 finalists. He was one of the finalists in the London. So he was able to make a film about this horrid stuff. Do you know? And I know when I go into, you know, some of the most horrible characters of Shakespeare, like Volumnia and Coriolanus, I carry that rage with me. The rage against my husband, the rage about the fact that I was married and was supposed to behave in a certain way. The rage that I didn't have any financial resources. That rage I'm able to put out there on stage. You know, it's transmuted. It's not always exactly the thing, but the emotion is there, and I can access that, which I'd have never been able to do if I hadn't felt it in life. Do you understand what I'm saying? So we use those things to become bigger people somehow. And, you know, and eventually I started my own theatre company, and I didn't care what people threw at me. I was going to survive because I could go out on stage and do it, or I would direct, you know, 20 people and do the most incredible fights. And you know, I think about Hamlet, who has no reason to live. He's totally depressed. And then when he gets a reason to live, which is called revenge his father, he doesn't want to do it because it's not something that comes inside him. And so he fucks up even more. And in the end, the whole kingdom falls because of his depression. You know, and what you see in theatre is that you can see the way that life works. And just to go back to Nikki's thing about, you know, we say this thing about theatre, therapy, and theology. And the thing about theology is that you're studying, you know, is there a God? What does God mean? Which kind of comes up in the plays, but it's a study of God. In therapy, you're trying to find the healing of God, but you're talking in a room to somebody. In our modern version of therapy, you know, there's two of you, and you're still keeping the secret between the two of you. Do you understand me? You're not putting it out there. It's between me and you. And therapists often tell people, don't tell anybody about, and I'm interested to know what Bessel thinks about that, but don't tell anybody what we're talking about. Well, no, you should tell everybody. Then theatre is the place where God is seen or heard. And why? Is because it's human beings acting out there, and the very act of that interchange, that act of the sublime language, that act of the actor getting up and saying, I'm going to show this, I'm going to exhibit this, gives you a strength that I think neither of the other two do. So, you know, I'm all for it. What do you think about therapy as two people in a private room, Bessel? I mean, it is good. You do get some insight.
Part of what I try to do
Sounds like a religious experience.
almost every day. I do all these webcasts all the time. I say, realize that therapy is a small part of what helps people. And the therapists are not the answer. Is that you have a piece where you help people to tell their stories about their lives, which is very important. Finding words for your internal experience is terribly powerful, but being able to talk about it doesn't necessarily change it. So I think therapy may give people a sense of, this is who I am, this is what happened to me, but theater and other things allow people to actually transform it. And so I think therapy oftentimes doesn't transform enough. It helps you to know what you're dealing with. It helps you, gives you a guide. Oh, that's what I'm feeling in my body. Oh, that's what I'm confused about. Oh, that's why I take heroin, because I cannot stand the feeling in my body. I better go and have somebody work on my body so my body can be calm, or get a yoga practice so I can regulate my physiology. Um, but but therapy does a small part of the whole thing, and it's useful, but it's not the whole thing. And I wish, let's put theater at the same level as therapy.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, sorry. Go ahead.
Right. No, no, and I think what's profound is that, you know, I'm sort of really in great awe of V, formerly known as Eve Ensler, who is also a major theater person, and I think is just incredibly enlightened. And she's another person like Shakespeare who is able to go very deep into the most horrendous parts of our own experience, and that's what Shakespeare was able to do. Like it's horrendous, you know. People kill each other all the time in Shakespeare, and then you walk out. You can, wasn't that beautiful? But when you really look at Lear and Othello and Macbeth, you're like, holy shit, that's about as bad as it gets. But he has the courage to go there, and allows us to know to know I can embody this and walk out and hang out with my friends and say that is a great play. Or in our current psychedelic research, the same thing happens. That yeah, these horrendous things happen to me. I know what happened to me, but it happened to me 5 years ago or 10 years ago. It's not happening right now, huh? And so this whole idea of getting sequences where one thing happens after another, and certain things lead to another thing, and then the play is over, is very different from being a traumatized person where the play never is over. They keep sort of repeating and reliving the same stuff over again. And so the great challenge is, how do you help this repetition come to an end so that you can be fully alive right now? And
So Vessel,
yeah.
would you say that the body, if the body is endangered, in other words, if the same incident starts coming up in your life that has always endangered you before, you know, that has does the body immediately start reflecting how you reacted to that danger before? Or what does the body do when you're...
It's even more pernicious than that. And that is that your brain gets developed to only feel alive when you're in danger. And when you're not in danger, you don't recognize yourself and you don't feel at home. So you feel depressed and sad and miserable when you're not in danger. And then you meet a guy who is dangerous and scary, and you go like, oh my God, I love this man, I'm going to save him. And then you're back in the same old stuff and the same old repetition that Shakespeare.
That's what I was doing. That's what I was doing.
And so
Save him, yeah.
the great challenge is, how do you feel alive when you're not in danger?
I don't know. I'm working on
Can you
that.
relate to that? Like,
you know, I'm currently going through something similar. Like, I am triggered, Tina, when you know, I get insecure about, you know, things my ex, or not my ex. Ooh, that was bad.
before the explanation out of that.
Yeah, right. we're gonna edit that part out. Well, he cheated on me a lot, and so now when I'm traveling out of town, I'm getting triggered, and it's not anything he's doing. And since we've been back together after our addiction, it has been nothing. He's showed me nothing but change and positive, and but then I get emotionally triggered and I'm back there and I don't trust him and I think he's going to hurt me, and I don't trust my love because the people I love have hurt me. So love, I associate with pain. Also, I was talking to Nikki about what kind of transformation it would be to my mind if I played a rape victim and fought back, and how that would transform, because I have gone through these sexual assault experiences so many times in my life, but I never can get out. I'm stuck. I just dissociate. I go away.
Yeah. I don't know whether this will help, but I did a play up in Canada, which a young woman produced who had been raped, and she got a very good playwright to write a play about her rape, if I can put it like that. And it was put on in a good theatre in Canada. She said, and she played the lead, she said it did help her. It did help her, you know, reenacting it and kind of that she could remind herself this was not real while it was happening. So even though her body would go into the thing, she could remind herself it was not happening. And the piece I'm working on now, which is called Becoming Othello, A Black Girl's Journey, it's Deborah Ann Bird's story, and she's being brought up in Harlem, and like you, she was raped, and her daughter was born with a degenerative disease, and then they gave her she was premature, so her daughter was dying a lot of the time, and the incidents of her life, besides the rape, which was with 3 men, she's now put it all into a play, and it's not that it isn't any less painful, it's that it moves through her. It's not stuck in her, and she's got this extra thing of knowing that she's saying it so that all the people who've been in the kind of predicament she's been in might be able to get some insight about their own lives, and that really helps as well.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, there's lots more other things. Purpose. Yeah. And so I don't know, Caroline, whether you know, that you're in the middle of I don't, maybe she should play Isabella or Desdemona or something, Nikki, next.
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't recommend Desdemona, like
no,
for rape victims. That's probably not the right role to play. But I think it's terribly important is that your body is set to react the same way to the same situation. And so another program that I love besides doing Shakespeare is something called Impact. Used to be called model bugging, where people basically set up a similar scene as where these terrible things happened before, but they're being taught martial arts, and some saintly guys volunteer to play the rapist, and they beat the shit out of this guy where they couldn't do that before. And so once you know what to do, you can say, today I could defend myself. Today I could poke his eyes out. And I think, again, part of what's great about Shakespeare, there's a lot of fighting in Shakespeare. And when you do the Shakespeare acting training, you learn to do all kind of fighting things and sword fighting and feel your body and the power in your body, which is opposite of being a trauma victim. And so you get to feel that strength of, I can defend myself, I can stand up for myself, and that becomes a deeply physical experience, which is, of course, missing in psychotherapy, where you talk, but you don't get the physical experience of internal sense of power and saying no, and no, I'm not going to do this. And so you get to really entrain yourself to be a person who defend themselves and who is able to stand up for themselves, which gets wiped out by trauma.
Yeah. I think one of the things I want to highlight here too, Tina, is in the work that you founded, and what your company taught me way back, I think starting in 2005, was that embodiment in Shakespeare's text allows us to speak the truth.
Yes.
And that was the greatest revelation for me in my personal life, my personal trauma.
Right.
That I had sat through many, many different forms of talk therapy, starting at the age of 5, and it never worked with me because sitting on my ass was not the way I lived in the world. And so when I discovered Shakespeare and Company, to speak the truth in front of an audience and be in my body and in my voice, It was your late husband, Dennis, that I worked with in '05. And it changed my entire life. And I credit your work for helping me learn to speak the truth. And it was scary, and I find it very moving even to this day. But once you learn to speak the truth and put your story or Shakespeare's text, which allows you to find your own story, it's incredibly impactful. And that was the journey that sort of made me think, wow, this is what it feels like to speak the truth. And it's scary, and it's powerful, and it's resonant, and more of us need to learn to do that.
You're actually pointing, I think, to the most important thing, Nikki, which is telling the truth, and not just telling the truth with the upper part of the body, but telling the truth with the whole body. So the whole body becomes the resonating chamber for the language, and then it becomes very powerful. So that I want to tell another little story about Kimberly White, who's a Linklater voice teacher, but she's been working with is Caroline going?
No, she has to take a pee break. So keep talking.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
I'll turn you up so she can hear you in the bathroom.
Don't say anything important while you're gone.
Okay. Well, anyway, Kimberly White was brought in by evident in Texas recently, or 2 years ago. There was a huge explosion in one of the, I think it was ExxonMobil. She's not allowed to say which oil company it was. Huge explosion. And about 20 of their Hispanic workers were really badly burned. And in the first round, they didn't think they were going to win the case. They brought Kimberly in to get the witnesses to actually tell the truth from the whole of themselves. And they did, and especially the lead woman witness. And she got up and she spoke from herself very powerfully. They not only won the suit, they won the largest financial settlement ever in the state of Texas. So I think it was $375 million that they won. So that those people who've been really badly damaged, but when it was in the lower courts, there was a real question about whether they were going to win because of the voices of the witnesses. Do you understand me? So it's this idea of embodying the truth and being brave enough, and she worked with them long enough that they got their truth out there. And
I could react to that. This should happen all the time. I've been in courtrooms where traumatized people come in, and the lawyers for the opposite are really smart, and they are abusive to the victims, and they lose their voice. They start sobbing. They start telling stories that are just there to plead for themselves, and they completely can kill the case.
yeah,
If you go into that frightened person and really make them more frightened. I saw it all the time in my priest abuse scandals, where it's very active, and these nasty smart lawyers just devastated the witnesses because they couldn't hold on to their truth, because their trauma came back, and they became like the typical blubbering response that you have when you become traumatized. So I think Kimberly should make a big business out of training people before they go to courtroom.
well, she does. Of course, she doesn't charge a lot of money because she wants them to win. Yeah, but Carolyn, can you describe what happened as you started playing viola on stage?
The first time or the last time?
Either,
Exactly.
or both.
The first time I played viola, it felt like I was fumbling for it. Yeah, I didn't know all my lines, and so I was super insecure. But by the last one, I almost, I robbed my brother when I was in my addiction. So that at the end, when the brother and the sister come back, holding my brother, it helped me kind of move on, like, because I caused a very deep harm to my brother, a trauma that is super deep for him, and he has a very hard time getting over it. I mean, accepting it and moving on. And that was a big fear of mine, is that. So it gave me the courage to try to fix that relationship or mend those bridges. Yeah. And oh gosh, it kind of feels like I lost myself. That's what it was like playing viola. It's like I lost myself. And then I found myself for love, because she
Very moving.
I mean, that is honestly like why I do the work I do, because I don't want my trauma, like I want to do the best I can to become the most healed person, because everything I carry is going to go to my daughter. You know, because I abandoned her, she has abandonment issues and stuff. And so, you know, I don't know. I think I got lost on my thought process there.
Oh no, but that was a lovely example, and the idea that you finding your brother at the end of the play and embracing him and coming together again, and that actually you found the truth in that allowed you to go back to your brother in life, I think is a beautiful example of how theatre works. In other words, it's not just, you don't just get up on stage and pretend to be somebody else and get off stage. It actually inhabits your body and it alters you, and it allows you to use stuff in your own life you know, it all gets mashed up somehow in the body and the psyche and allows you to go somewhere else. So, and because I mean, you know, I do think people say, well, what are you doing with that dead white male? You know? Well, I sometimes, you know, but it's because he's a great artist, and great artists actually transcend all those barriers, you know, whether they're composers or playwrights or, you know, or great scientists even. They transform what it means to be a human being, and allows us to be with it, to piggyback on them somehow, and they awaken the best in us too.
Yeah, there's another thing that Caroline and you both brought up, and that is that in theater, the show goes on. And so you get overwhelmed by your feelings, as for example, you just did thinking about your brother, but you still need to perform your act. And so the issue at the beginning comes, oh, I'm a very hurt person to whom terrible things have happened. But at the end, the focus becomes, how can I be the best possible actress as part of this troupe? So your whole orientation changes from, oh my God, how am I going to survive being who I am, into how can I be the best possible actor that can be. And so the focus goes into competency and being very good at something. And I remember during our Shakespeare training, people get triggered as people falling apart. And Dennis kept saying, say your lines, say your lines. You cannot go and get carried away by all that horrible stuff that's being brought up. You need to continue to do the job. And so you really learn to have your feelings, but also not be dominated by them, because the show goes on.
Yes.
And at the end you say, I'm a very good actress and I'm still dealing with all the crap that happened to me, but I'm also a trustworthy member of this group. And I'm helping my troupe to earn money, or whatever you do with your troupe, you know?
You bring up a great point, Bessel, that I remember Dennis saying fondly and probably yelling at us, and probably you too, Tina, put it on the text.
Yes.
Put it on the text.
Yeah.
Can become overwhelmed over our emotion. And if we play it, if we put it on the text, we can change the whole world.
Yes.
I mean, and that's not just true on stage, right? That's true in our life. If we learn to put it on the text, put our feelings into the text. Yeah. And you bring up a beautiful thing, Tina, in sort of looking at Caroline's relationship with her brother in life and in the play, because both are one and the same, as I believe, is that we get to really go back to that line that Viola says, I am not what I am. And when we're playing our lives, when we're playing plays, we have to rummage through our toolbox all the time to find where's the mother, where's the lover, where's the best friend.
Right.
We have to play all the parts of ourselves. And how when you're sitting in facility, which I recognized when I walked in and met Caroline, is that sometimes the labels that we stick on ourselves are so big, so heavy, that it's hard to find the other parts of ourselves.
Right.
And that's been something that I've been really fascinated about, of how, as we get older, whether we're incarcerated or not, do we keep finding the other parts of ourselves that allow us to play more in our lives, that allow us to take on other roles? So it's both a dropping of our labels and a picking up of them,
Right.
you know?
Well,
That's what I think about now when I think of
That's
that
the problem
line.
with therapy. Therapy alone, you identify yourself, oh, I'm a drug addict, or I'm an incest victim, or I'm a rape victim. And that becomes your identity that gives you legitimacy to become having been a therapeutic relationship. In theater, you use your being a drug addict and you use being an incest victim to become a member of a group and to transcend yourself. And the issue of transcendence is absolutely critical, and therapy is very bad at that. Really.
Mhm.
I mean, I think in my experience, I used a lot of like a CB, cognitive behavioral therapy tools. Like I would spray cologne on a thing and smell it just so I can like start desensitizing my brain, because I would go hang out with friends and it was a very common cologne, Acqua di Gio Armani, you know, everyone wears that. And so I had to like learn how to still be there as a person without letting me start just bawling as soon as I walk in a room. And people think you're awfully weird when that happens. Yeah, and I wanted to say one more thing about what I learned playing viola as I was thinking about it. I learned that you make your own identity. You know, in the beginning,
Oh, yes.
in the beginning, she was a woman, and she realized to keep herself safe and to move about this structure of community where they judge women or hold them to different standards than men. She had to keep herself safe, and she used that. And at the end, she had to find her truth and come and, you know, be a woman, and that was her truth. And she was able to say that truth even though all those judgments were there. I think that speaks to what Nikki was saying too, because that's something I have a hard time with, is letting go of the labels that followed me. I'm a felon. That's always going to follow me. Yeah.
Thank you for saying that. It's very important.
We have about 15 minutes left, so I'll open the floor for anything that you might want to say, share, offer.
I have to pee
I'll
though
take
now.
the
I have to pee.
Okay, you pee. I wanted to talk a tiny bit about how Caroline and I came together and sort of the work of On the Inside. Caroline and I met in 2018 at Coffee Creek Correctional through Open Hearts, Open Minds, as we were working on 12th Night. We only met recently in the flesh, in person, outside of prison about 3 months ago, when Caroline found something on social media and said, Nikki, you're doing this work. I'm so glad. And that built this connection. And so we've been sharing and facilitation in our class series with groups on the outside and on the inside. We write a weekly newsletter to 3 different facilities, one in the state of Oregon, one in Wyoming, one in Nebraska. It's an old school sort of pen pal system where women have the opportunity to respond through text, through poetry, through visual art, and we share what work they're making on the inside with our class groups that are meeting on the outside over Zoom. We've started working in person probably, I don't know, in the last 4 or 5 months in a little office space where we're sort of creating more programming that'll take us to Kenya this summer. But really, I think this work over the course of since 2018, really what I think about is what and it grew end of 2019 to a class of over 30 women that eventually stood up and told their own personal stories, songs, dances to two audiences. We did an in-house for adults incarcerated, and then the second night we did a show for outside audience, family and friends in a cafeteria visiting room. And what happened during that was the superintendents and counselors came up and said, whatever's happening in the room, Nikki, you need to do more of it, because there's been more transformation during this class than we've seen in most of the therapy that's happened. It's been the first time at Coffee Creek on the medium maximum side that any kind of creative programming like this has existed. And really what I think has happened during this year of COVID, as we've looked at how do we value connection, how are we showing up, our pivot really was, well, if we can't be in person, so the idea that we're creating a book at the end of this year that feature women's stories that are on the outside of facility, women.
You have a bad connection.
I have a bad connection.
Oh, no.
Yeah, you guys freeze. No, you're back to life. Yeah.
It wasn't on that page. Yeah,
You come over
I
here. I
think
thought you're still good. But
with all the differences. Wait, am I still frozen?
for a moment, then you freeze again.
Oh,
Yeah.
can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, now we can hear you. Don't know for how long.
I just wanted. Oh, what? Oh, okay. I better talk quick then. I think it's important to realize that with all the differences that we separate ourselves with through women that are incarcerated and women who have never experienced anything, we can find
I hate to miss what you're saying. Yeah, you're gone. You're frozen.
Maybe we should just bump our gums while they do it, get him coming back online, Bessel.
Anyone?
You think? Oh, okay. They went off now. They'll come back. That's a good idea. Because I hate. Are you guys back? Hi.
Turn your mic on. Okay.
Now, tell us everything you said in the last.
Yes, you have to start again.
okay. I said I think it's really important to look at everything that separates us and the labels we all put on each other when we start to put that aside and realize the similarities we all carry and can learn from the different human experiences that we're surrounded by. That's when we can bridge the gap and come together as change. I think a lot of people look around our society, look at trauma victims and look at addiction and homelessness and say, we're tired of tents on the side of the road. And this is what I'm doing to be part of the change, because what we really need to do is heal or help us facilitate the healing for these humans to be able to not only come out and be a benefit to our community, give their experience to our young people so they don't go down the same path. So I think the connection between bringing people from the outside and celebrate.
They're seeing such good things. Welcome back.
Oh no.
This is the year of connection and disconnection. In this
So,
moment.
Caroline, did you finish saying what you were saying? Can I pick up on the empathy thing?
Yep.
I first of all, I totally, I mean, obviously your 2 years in jail in some ways did help you, but the idea of punishment as opposed to empathy seemed to me that they don't go together. And somebody told me this line recently, that somebody asked the great anthropologist Margaret Mead, when did civilization begin? And she said, when the first tribesperson didn't leave behind the man with the broken feeble, but picked him up and took him to heal it. That's the moment civilization began. And so this idea that we look after each other, and that actually empathy, which is, a feminine attribute, if I can put it like that, that is deemed feminine, is the thing that actually allows us to look after each other, to think what each other wants, and to supply that. And putting people in jail doesn't help. Now, it might help to actually take somebody away and really help them with their addiction. I don't know. I mean, I'm not an expert in that. But what I do know is punishing people only makes things worse. And if you punish a horse won't get worse. I mean, a horse won't get better. A horse will get worse, and will become more vicious. And even if you manage to break the spirit of somebody through punishment, then you've killed them in a way. So empathy, it seems to me, is the attribute that we really need to develop, which is why women have got to start running at least half the world, if not all of the world. Well, women and Bessel.
That's another part. And that is that I think the reason that people are so dismissive of, and that people are so dismissive of homeless people and all this stuff is because they don't know what to do about it. Huh? And I think the big issue is that we are really, to a large degree, stuck in helping people to move out of it. And that's really why I was eager to be part of this program, because I hope people will really listen to you and listen to the fact that theater makes a big difference. And of course, your insurance company is not going to pay you to do Shakespeare. Huh? And I think the big missing piece is not how terrible trauma is for people. The missing piece is what can we do about it, and that the models that we are stuck with what to do about it are models that don't work. And then people get resentful about billions of dollars being wasted. And for me, the important thing is that what Caroline is doing is saying, look, this is where I was, and this is where I am now. Huh? So a little investment on the Shakespeare program paid off hugely. And I think at the end, the issue of economics is very important. Do we pour more money into this hole, or do we actually know how to do things? And that's really, I see this part as my job in life, is to point out to people, yes, there are things you can do that are different from taking medicines or talking about the story over and over again, And I think Caroline is a living example of how it works, and that puts a big burden on you, of course, to be a living example, which you probably can't always be. But it's really our job to really let people know, yes, there are things that help. Because I think people get stuck in a position like we're just wasting our money, we're wasting our time.
I'm curious, in our final few minutes here, if we want to reinforce together a practice that comes from Tina's company, a reinforcement, something that's intentionally positive that happened during our time together, that someone said or did, something that you might take with you from this conversation. So those of you that are listening, if you're listening, you might do this on your own. And for the panelists, I invite you to reinforce, and then call on one of us to follow you. Who's going first?
What's very clear to me is Caroline's talking about her playing viola and how it resonated with her internal experience, and she was allowed or helped to actually play that transformative role. And if you had gotten a different role, that would have been equally transformative. If you had played Lady Macbeth, I bet you would have gotten just the same amount of stuff out of it. Like, but I think for me the great thing is Caroline being here because she has lived a life, and she is a living example of how powerful it can be if people are helped to find themselves.
Mhm.
Well, I reinforced the whole conversation. I mean, it's very important to have these conversations, and particularly to have them well, almost anywhere, but here we are, one theatre practitioner, one shrink. I don't know what what label you'd give yourself, Caroline. But Nikki's very being is somebody who seeks to transform things all the time. What would you call yourself, Caroline?
Human.
Human. So Nikki's humanness, all our humanness is, so I want to reinforce being human, you know, not only being human, but getting our voices out there so that we spread humanity as opposed to punishment and condemnation and you know, moral, whatever you want to call it. Nikki, what do you want to reinforce?
I reinforce the voice, the power of the voice, and how we've brought our voices together to have this conversation today, against all odds, against connection and disconnection. And also something Caroline said earlier, in thinking about playing viola, that I learned that you make your own identity. I'm gonna stick that in my bag.
Yeah,
Caroline.
Okay, if I cry, okay. I want to reinforce Tina's work. What you gave Nikki has like changed my life for the first time in my life. I have somebody I can have my emotions, and it's okay. Whatever experience I'm going through, she meets me there, and I get to feel what it feels like to be with somebody, around somebody safe. And that wouldn't have happened if you didn't teach her all this stuff. And I also you to know is a tool. I use it as a tool for a lot. And I really appreciate you coming here. And you, Tina. All right.
The one thing that I forgot to ask before we go, Bessel, that I thought I had to ask about the orgasm at the end of your book. when you mentioned after Tina's work and working at Shakespeare and Company, I re-listened to that about 3 times this morning and said, I think I've never heard that before. I found that so amazing that working through text connected you in a profound way to your body.
Wasn't me.
Yeah.
Wasn't you?
I took the Shakespeare acting track in order to have that experience. It didn't happen to me.
Oh, it didn't?
No, it happened to one of our teachers.
Well, you need to own it, Bessel.
Yeah.
No, it didn't happen to me. I wish it did.
I want to thank you both for taking the time and for sharing this work with Caroline and I, and for sharing your expertise and your energy. And I hope this is the start of more conversations like this. So thank you for being here today, very, very much. And thank you for all of you that tuned in, and those of you that are inside watching this. We hope to sit with you in circle sometime soon. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Be good. Bye.